How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne and this is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. In today's video, I've got three great topics for you. First up, Sony just teased the PS5 Pro in a really weird way, and this is not related to the Astrobot story, by the way. Second on the list, I built my own PSP3 and it's actually pretty awesome. And finally, if you're having trouble with any of the face buttons on your DualSense, try this before you send it in for repairs. All right, let's start out with this first news story here, which is that Sony just teased the PS5 Pro in a really bizarre way. So if you bought a PS5 or a PS5 Slim, you probably saw a gold 8K badge sitting there on the box, which, you know, is on the Xbox Series X box as well. But people were like always making fun of that because we can't even hit true 4K in PS5 games. So the idea of it being able to play 8K games always seemed like a pipe dream at best, and, you know, just something else to put on the box at worst. I really have no interest in 8K TVs. I love the way my 4K TVs look. My OLED upstairs looks amazing. It's super high resolution, and I've seen 8K TVs in real life and I really can't tell the difference. I would always laugh at my parents growing up because when we upgraded our CRT TVs that we had all over our house into like 1080p HD screens, they said they couldn't see the difference, and I was like, you are actually insane. I also thought they were crazy when they couldn't see the difference between 1080p and 4K, but this time around, I'm sure if I showed them like a 4K TV and an 8K TV side by side, there's no way they would be able to see the difference, because me, someone who grew up with the evolution of TVs, I can't see a difference at all. Honestly, when I'm on PC, I play all my games at 1440p because even recognizing the difference between 1440p and 4K is tough, and most PS5 games run at 1440p at most anyway. And then they just upscale it with FSR2 or checkerboarding up to 4K, but you can still see the edges, and honestly, I think 1440p looks fine. So like 8K, I just personally don't really care. It's not something that's going to make me excited for the eventual PS6. But the bizarre thing is, Sony started taking that badge off of the box of the PlayStation 5, and honestly, the only reason I could think of for them to do that would be because they're going to tease that feature with the PS5 Pro. We've heard in all the leaks from Digital Foundry and Moore's Law is Dead that this thing is going to be branded as an 8K console, as is the next generation Xbox, and honestly, I don't think any games are going to be able to hit 8K. I'm pretty sure there is one game so far released this entire generation that can go all the way up to 8K, and that is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. It just runs that good because it's a 2.5D Metroidvania platformer, but outside of that specific game, I don't think there's a single other game that's been released this generation that can take advantage of 8K. But, you know, they're going to push any marketing tool they can, because if you come out with the PS5 Pro and the only thing you have to market is that it's more powerful, so it'll be able to run games at 60 frames per second that were 30 FPS on the regular PlayStation 5, that's not enough of a bullet pointed list for most people, especially outside of the hardcore, the casual user. They need a lot more reasons to upgrade their PS5 or spend more money on a PlayStation 5 Pro in the first place if they haven't upgraded yet. Like they're part of that 50% of PS4 players, or they just never bought a PS4 in the first place and they're waiting for a new console to really get them to make the jump. And really, it's all down to timing, right? Like we know that the PS5 Pro is coming this year. They've got it ready to go. It's been ready for a long time. All of the developers out there right now have development units. We've seen the specs that they have to reach to be able to put that PS5 Pro enhanced branding on the box of their game, and it's all like 60 FPS using ray tracing, high resolution, stuff like that. So we know it's coming this year around September. Right now, we're already in June, and that's 3 months away. If you have a feature that's not being taken advantage of at all by the PlayStation 5, it just makes a whole lot of sense for me for them to take it off of the box and then just put it on the box of the PS5 Pro and then eventually the PlayStation 6. Obviously, this is a losing battle. I think 8K will eventually become the standard because with TVs, you always need a new thing to chase. Back when I was growing up, when Uncharted 2 was coming out, it was 3D. You could actually buy a Sony 3D branded PlayStation TV that looked like the PS3. You could play some games in 3D with it. That didn't really catch on at all because the glasses didn't work right. You needed to charge them, and 3D isn't really that cool of effect. So they went to 4K, then they went to OLED, then they went to HDR, and now they're going to bump bump up to 8K. So whether I want it or not, I feel like in a few years, like 5 to 10 years, the only option is going to be 8K anyway. So it makes sense that they want to support that resolution with this console because it's going to last at least until 2027. I was looking at fan reactions to this to see what people were saying, and people were like, oh, Sony needs to be sued because this is false advertising. It does have the capability to be plugged into an 8K TV and output to an 8K TV. So really, they're not lying, right? Like, it has the ability to get to 8K. It's just that there's no games that are ever really going to get there outside of Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I just can't get mad about this. I just think it's more of a sign that they need more features to tease for the PlayStation 5 Pro. So they're just quietly removing the 8K badge from the box. And then when the PS5 Pro comes out, we'll see that badge reappear, but just on the box for that console. I'm really hoping they announce this thing sooner rather than later. I know in the past with like every console, Sony really traditionally sticks to September, but we've seen this generation, they're willing to buck the trend. With the PS5 Slim, they announced that thing like less than a month before it came out. The PS4 Slim, they didn't even announce. It showed up on store shelves before they announced it, and then it was like a Black Friday deal with a bundle. So when it comes to hardware, I feel like they're playing fast and loose. And also when it comes to the showcases this generation, they've been all over the place, right? Like, we got one before the PS5 launch that showed off a bunch of games. We got one in September, then we got one in May of last year. This year in May, we just got a state of play, and now they're probably planning one for around August or September for the PS5 Pro. But regardless, they need to get some hype out there, right? Like, they need to show off these first party games. They need to show off the PS5 Pro. And I'm just glad that we have some sort of sign of life directly from Sony, even if it is small and, you know, not a surefire hit in terms of them confirming the PS5 Pro. But to me, this just signifies that the PS5 Pro is coming and they are actively getting ready for it. So it's honestly kind of exciting. Next on the list here, I want to talk about how I built my own PSP3. So I've had the PlayStation Backbone controller sitting around for a while now. I've used it with some mobile games like Assoluto Racing, which is just a ripoff of Gran Turismo on the iPhone. I've used it a little bit with Diablo Immortal when I played that for like a week. There's a few games that I've used it with, but when all of these emulators came to the iPhone, the first thing that popped into my mind was, oh, I'm going to download a bunch of PSP and PS1 games and see if they work with the Backbone controller. I downloaded the PPSSPP app, and it's kind of weird to use because most PSP games, when you download them, they come in 7-zip files, and PPSSPP, I hate saying that app does not support 7-zip files. But if you didn't know, they released the full RetroArch app on iPhone as well, and that one takes 7-zip files just fine. So I switched over to that app and I downloaded a few games, starting with Gran Turismo. Of course, the PSP version is just like a dumbed down version of Gran Turismo 4, which is awesome. I really liked that game back in the day. I downloaded Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Chains of Olympus, Ghost of Sparta, Burnout Legends, a whole bunch of games, and I was really happy to find that all of these games run at full speed absolutely fine on the iPhone using this Backbone controller, and I didn't even have to set up the controller. RetroArch natively knew what controller I was using. It even named it the PlayStation Edition Backbone controller, and they have a little handy arrow on the screen so you can get rid of the on-screen touch controls. So once you plug this thing into your phone, it literally becomes the next generation version of the PlayStation Portable, which is awesome. I know there's other YouTubers out there who love doing this to the point where they get Android phones or other phones that they're not using, like an older iPhone or something like that. I'm just using my iPhone 15 Pro Max with this, which I'm assuming is why it performs so well with all these games. And I ended up playing Gran Turismo in my backyard for over an hour and a half last night. The battery drain was negligible, mainly because I'm assuming these games are so low resolution. Like, I started, I had 60% battery. When I was done, I had 55. So it was sipping battery life. It wasn't sapping it in any way, which I think is great. And the setup process was honestly dead simple. All I had to do was go into RetroArch's settings and download the PSP assets. If you didn't know, PSP doesn't have BIOS. You can just emulate the games like on any emulator whenever you want, but you need to download like the text files and everything like that the games use, because I guess they pulled those from the PSP itself. So when I started up Gran Turismo for the first time, it didn't have any text. So I just Googled that and I found out that, yeah, you just go into the settings of RetroArch, download the PSP assets for that core, you're good to go right there. And at first I was like, am I really going to use this all the time? Is this something that I'm going to use more than once or twice? And I came away from the experience saying, yeah, mainly because it's a much smaller footprint in a backpack. Like, I have my Summer Games Fest / Xbox Showcase trip coming up this weekend, and I can only bring a backpack because I waited too long to get my flight and I'm cheap. So I'm flying traveling spirit, so pray for me, guys, that nothing crazy happens on this flight. But yeah, I can only bring my big backpack that's like a duffel bag with backpack straps, and I was looking at my Steam Deck and I was like, I don't know if that's gonna fit with the whole case and everything like that. But on my Steam Deck, the games I'm playing right now are older games anyway. I'm playing Gran Turismo 4. This one that I play is an isometric game called Super Woden GP2, which is like an isometric version of Gran Turismo 4. I'm just playing a lot of racing games. The only other game I'm playing right now is Elden Ring, and I'm far enough in the game where I know I'll beat it before the DLC, so I don't feel like it's that big of a deal if I just leave my Steam Deck behind and toss this Backbone controller in my bag. The only unfortunate error I ran into is that the original Backbone PlayStation controller I bought was for the old iPhone with Lightning, and I have a new iPhone that has USB-C, but I was happy to find that the price has come down on this. When I paid for it, it was over $100. I think it was like at least $120 when I got it on Amazon, but this time around it was on sale for $75 and it had same-day delivery on Amazon. So I ordered it after I finished filming my video yesterday, and it showed up in just a couple of hours. And if you get RetroArch up and running on your iPhone, it has like a bunch of other consoles in there, like PlayStation 1. I'm pretty sure it has like Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Super Nintendo, and all that. The only emulator that hasn't come over yet is PS2, and once that happens, I could see myself playing a whole lot of PS2 games on the go, because even upscaling these PSP games, they still look really good. So I can only imagine games from the PS2 era that have a much higher internal resolution, like Gran Turismo 4. Those would run and look just fine on the iPhone with the Backbone controller. So yeah, this is a really good experience that I honestly think was worth it in the end, and I'm kind of shocked I'm saying that because I personally don't like playing games on my phone. It's absolutely nuts to me that Sony isn't working on some sort of app store or something where you can just download classic PlayStation games to take on the go. They've dabbled with this in the past with the Xperia Play. It had its own PlayStation mobile store. They had these PlayStation Minis games that went along with it, but you could also play some PS1 and PSP games on it and just bring that store back, port it back over to the iPhone. Xbox is working on their own store where they're going to sell Xbox games on the iPhone, so it feels like an absolute no-brainer. Like, let me use my PlayStation Plus subscription that I don't have to take these games on the go with my iPhone. And obviously it wouldn't be that hard to port them over, because when we've seen ports of these games before, like when the 3DS got Game Boy games like Pokemon and everything like that, Nintendo was caught just downloading the ROMs online and then putting them on the eShop. So if it really is that easy, the cost investment for Sony is negligible at best. Like, all they have to do is just make the app that's a little storefront and let you buy these games. And that brings us to the third news story on the list, which has to do with the DualSense controller. Look, I have been a PlayStation gamer a long time, and every generation of PlayStation, the controller has given me a little bit of issue. First off, the DualShock 3, the rubber would wear down on that thing relentlessly. You would get rattling inside the 6-axis controller. When you got a launch edition DualShock 4, the rubber would wear down in the same way. But I gotta be real, the only issue I've ever really had with the DualSense controller so far is that sometimes the circle button will stick, right? Like if you're playing for a long time, your hands get a little sweaty like they do for me in Gran Turismo. Sometimes that like sweat will get in between the buttons and there's not a big enough gap, so it'll make the circle button skip. But I've discovered this issue that people are having where the triangle button will just become non-functional on their controller, and getting your controller repaired by Sony is such an annoying process, especially with the fact that getting someone on the line is difficult now because you need to be level 4 of PlayStation stars to actually get someone quickly. So a lot of people just don't do it and they'll go out and buy another controller. But there's a weird fix you can do that allegedly, like according to a lot of people who have had this problem on Reddit and an article that I read about it, you just slam your controller on the floor a few times and that will repair the triangle button. The article I read on this said that there was no way this would work. He was like really nervous about it, and I get it. If you only have one DualSense controller, you don't want to break it, but it's like, I guess it's worth trying because, you know, your controller already doesn't work with triangle, which is an essential button for the controller. So like, you really have nothing to lose outside of voiding your warranty by breaking off parts on the inside. But what he did is he slammed the controller on the ground 3 times and that miraculously fixed the triangle button. I don't know what generation DualSense he had, but Sony has done, I think, at least 4 revisions of the DualSense. Like, I compared my white DualSense that came with my launch PS5 to the one that came with my PS5 Slim, and the one that comes with the Slim is sturdier for sure. The rubber on the sticks feels a little bit different. The buttons are a lot clickier, and I have to say, that issue I've had with the circle button sticking on my black controller and the God of War controller back there, that has not happened on the white DualSense. It could be down to the fact that I use the DualSense Edge for the vast majority majority of my game time on the PlayStation 5, but when I had my console upstairs and downstairs and I was using both interchangeably more, I was playing Rebirth down here quite a lot with that white controller, just knocking out side quests because my brother was living with me at the time and I didn't want to like play games in front of other people upstairs, and it like still works just fine. So I'm assuming this triangle issue really only affects some of the earlier generations of the controller, but still it's a frustrating experience that, you know, the best way to fix it is to slam your controller on the ground versus just getting it repaired by Sony for free, because they created this weird system where you have to buy enough games with them to get customer service support at an acceptable level. Like, obviously I'm not into that, but that's the current reality. So if you run into this issue where your triangle button stops working, maybe slam your controller on the ground a few times. It might work. But yeah, that's all I've got for you in today's video. If you're at Summer Games Fest, if you're at the Xbox Showcase, I don't know why you would be if you're watching this channel, or if you're just around LA Live this weekend and you see me, feel free to come up and say hi. I love meeting you guys. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.